to let everyone know. So thank you. Let's see, Scott, Sean, Andy is with me. Dav, Christian is here. Good. Gabriel, good. All right. So let's get started. I think I've got a little bit of an agenda started, but not much of one. So the biggest thing, this is a not just a temporary change. We've been trying to bring in the folks at Intel Labs because they're extremely active with what's going on with Aether. And there has been an ongoing conflict that we were able to resolve and keep the current TST able to attend. And although I suspect it will cause some amount of hardship, it looks like we've got pretty good turnout here from others as well. So I think we really need to make this the time going forward, and we'll get the calendars and so on updated appropriately. That's Pacific time on Tuesdays.
And Larry, if you're meaning to be sharing, I'm not seeing it here.
Yeah, I have not yet started sharing.
Okay.
I'll do that in a second,
it.
because I was going to go on to something else and share something else in a minute. But so, yeah, let me just a second. Since you're here, Christian, could you just say a couple words about what your team is doing and the ongoing work that you know about with Aether at Intel Labs?
Sure, yeah, with pleasure. So, we have been involved with Aether for a long time, right? We are focused mainly on the UPF on our side, plus, other component. Right now, we have a couple of stuff ongoing. We have a collaboration with Dubai Telecom, where they have deployed, Aether as POC, right? Proof of concept. And we added a few edge applications, one of them being defect detection, AI/ML-based defect detection, another one being visual data management system for specific usage model. Defect detection to detect bad solar cells in very large solar field, right? So a drone is flying and the image is being sent and the cells are, labeled good or bad. And visual data management to detect unattended luggages in the airport, right? So, for security reason. So that's with Dubai Telecom. We also have an ongoing engagement, and hence the conflict at 9 a.m. With the Department of Defense, with the Navy, to do an end-to-end secure slicing based on Aether for the mobile core, the ROC, and using OAI, the Open Air Interface Radio, to provide, the slicing capabilities. So these are a few ongoing work with external partners. We also continue internal work at Intel using Aether, again, to evaluate the benefit of multi-slices and with different SLA pair slice, right, for different usage model, right? We'd like to move, we have autonomous mobile robot usage model in Bangalore in India that we're moving now to run on Aether. And we'd like to make sure, the latency and everything works fine, right, for this usage model. So that's some of the ongoing work. Gabriel is also here online. As you know, we collaborate also closely with Purdue, Shabazz. We did also extend AIAB to be able to operate in a multi-node cluster instead of a single node Kubernetes cluster. So we have this up and running now, and I know you also have been doing work in this area. So these are the type of work we're doing with Aether. And we'll be happy to describe them in more detail if you guys need.
Yeah, I think over time we should do more of these, and we also have, FYI, an Aether users group meeting, and it's not a meeting in the same way as the TST, but we try to schedule presentations of how people are using Aether, and
That's good.
getting something scheduled on some of these projects would be great. Plus, we can discuss it.
Yeah. Also, some work we do closely with ONF, and I see Ashutosh online here. Ashutosh is based in Bangalore, so thank you, Ashutosh. It's late over there. We've been developing a few X app in the area of energy savings, and one of them to do sell on off based to adapt on workload. We're extending it now to do MIMO chain on off again based on the workload, right? So this X app run over the ONF rig, and we're using the RAN sim simulator to simulate the data for these X apps, right? So that's also some work we're doing here.
So just that's a great thing that I don't know that if this generally this group knows about, and I'm not sure if RAN sim is the exact right acronym for it, but a simulator, we have a GNB sim that we run with against the core, but RAN sim runs against the RIC. So I think there's quite a bit of interest in ramping that up, and more work happening there. More work needs to go into the simulator as well.
Yes.
All right, thanks. That's good. So felt it was really important to get you guys involved in this. The current TST is being, individual members are being pulled in various directions at Intel, but there's a very strong nucleus of activity happening in your group. And let me just add, since I believe this is also the case, support for Pronto, I think is maybe, I don't know if you're involved with that directly. Whoops.
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, we had a no cost extension from Stanford, right? So I would say the paperwork is undergoing. I know Intel Federal sends the documentation to Stanford. We will get two contractors to help support, Aether Central and Aether, right? So one contractor in Bangalore and one here in the US. Most likely.
I think that's the key thing is supporting Aether Central on behalf of the current universities that are running at the edge.
Right.
Yeah.
So, obviously it'll be ramp up time, and Scott is here online, and Sean is here. So I'm sure we'll come and ping you. We pinged Hyun Soon already, and Andy, right? As you know, it's a significant piece of software, and I know Sean has been working also closely with Suresh. I don't know if Suresh is online. Yeah, Suresh is online also in Bangalore. So Suresh, is knowledgeable about the ROC. He made the changes into the ROC for the ability to create and launch multi-slices from the core point of view. And we added properties for the slices, right? Radio level properties, mean, max, PRB, right? PRB ratio, as well as some security level is a slice. Non-secure is a slice running with SGX. We have the ability to run the UPF in an SGX enclave, or is a slice secure with a Navy encryption, which we don't have access to. We don't know what it is.
Thanks for that very impromptu. I didn't realize my video was on, but so you've been able to see the bottom half of my head.
Just now, yeah, it just turned on.
So what was I going to, maybe I accidentally hit that as I was trying to bring up something else. Just a second here, share screen. Yeah, so I have been recording this in the agenda, FYI, but this is just a synopsis of what was just said. Okay, so I think going forward, there's going to be a lot of interconnecting points here that we can take advantage of moving Aether forward, and we will take advantage of that over time. I don't see other agenda items. If you have any reports or status, please, claim a bullet, even if you don't write down any detail in the agenda. I want to talk about on-ramp for a minute. This is, as you heard, is work that has been going on also with Purdue. And you didn't So AJ in particular also has quite a pretty strong connection with the working on Purdue because they've been testing the scalable
GNPC.
stateless
Yeah.
core.
Yeah, stateless core. Yeah.
Stateless core, and so the work that I've connected with them is supporting on-ramp as a way of getting started and being able to ramp up both the core and the simulator and connect physical Gnode Bs and the whole 9 yards. So I'm going to call this a pre-release. We've not announced it yet, but if you go to actually I've got it here, so I'll just pull it up. On-ramp is now an official repo in the Open Networking Lab repository that's ought to help everyone that is able to collaborate with ONF. That's already a pre-approved place. The README is extremely minimal, but what it does show you is sort of gives you a bit of an introduction of what's there. It's all Ansible based. And there's a quick start version of OnRamp, which is kind of OnRamp's equivalent to Aether in a box because it all runs in one VM. But that's kind of the special case for OnRamp. You can also bring up, and like I said, run a scalable number of emulated RANs against it or physical eNode Bs, Gnode Bs, and eNode Bs as far as that's concerned. So I won't go through this in any detail, but you can actually give this a try.
Laurie?
What's not shown here is the documentation for doing the more complicated things. I don't have a permanent, I need to figure out a good way of posting this permanently. What's there now is that you can, which I can add here, you can get the source for the documentation, build HTML, and then view it locally. I can put the recipe here so that you can do that for yourself. And then when you do, trying to see if this is the one that has it. Yeah, you can find the documentation. Right now, it's attached to the 5G book, which I think is helpful for some people, but that's probably not the proper way to release the documentation for OnRamp, which is also self-contained, so you don't have to have the book. So I'll figure out how to get that URL up, and then I think at that point we'll be ready to do a fuller release. Questions about that? You've been hearing about it.
Larry,
yeah, go ahead.
I noticed that when you clone the repo, it says like dependencies. So how many dependencies? What are those dependencies that it like submodules?
Yeah.
That it needs?
Question. So let me go back out to Open Networking Lab, and you'll see all of them named Aether. So there's Aether OnRamp, which then has a self-contained repo for the 5G core, one for the 4G core, one for a variant of Kubernetes that works with Aether, one for the simulator, and one for AMP, which loads both the ROC and the monitoring. So all of these Ethers-foo are the set of repos. And in fact, if you go to the documentation, one of the things it shows you is where all the repositories are, including the OnRamp repositories. So that's, they'll be documented there. That's still.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, great. So each of these individual repos, they may, the READMEs in each one of these right now is probably lagging the root README because I spent last week at Purdue trying to get this all finalized, and there's a few corner cases we have to, rearrange the documentation. But each of these are standalone. If you only cared about the core, you can build it from here. But this is about bringing up all of Aether. So, and I might just throw the documentation in here as another dependency, but I haven't quite figured out how to do that because I also want to have it available as part of the book. Yeah, so questions? I'd really, if you've been using Aether in a box, I'd like to get your feedback on this. It may be just a a hair harder than Ether in a box to do the simplest thing. Because we wanted you to have to edit something, so you took ownership of it instead of discovering it behind the scenes. For Andy's here chuckling.
Yeah, I can only type make. That's all I can do.
As I mentioned to you from like probably 2 months ago, I did like how the files were distributed in OnRamp, but now with this new kind of distribution that you have now, I may need to take a look into that. But as of last version that you had, how you had the different blueprints, I did like a lot the way how everything was kind of distributed. So and make things easier and simpler to understand, at least for the previous OnRamp.
Yeah, so but basically that previous version of OnRamp did everything with make files, and the partitioning that we did of the make files and the factoring, the structuring actually just directly fell through to here. It's just that now instead of a series of make commands, it's the playbook.
Okay.
But there's still the global thing, because if you go into the OnRamp directory, you will find a vars file. And these are essentially the blueprint. So main is the default. And what you would find in there is a section on configuring Kubernetes, a section on the variables you need to configure the core, a section on the variables you need to configure the simulator, and a section on the variables you need to configure the AMP. And then the make file is the other thing that pulls everything together. And basically, if you go to the bottom of the make file, it includes all of the per component make files. But then for convenient, and I think the documentation, the comments here may be slightly out of date. Bilal was going to fix those, but basically there's now a global Ether KS install and so on. And then
so from this perspective, we can we can deploy ourselves the Kubernetes cluster and then just use the remaining components of OnRamp to deploy just the core network, for example.
You mean go back to the make file? I think it should.
No. What I mean is you have now different step. You have one specific step to install the Kubernetes cluster, right?
Right.
So what I'm saying is, can we just use OnRamp ourselves, deploy Kubernetes cluster, our own Kubernetes version, and then use OnRamp to just deploy the core itself?
Yeah. So that's a great question. And this is not a vanilla. This is not a vanilla Kubernetes. This is a Kubernetes that's been configured to support Ether. But what you just said, I think it should work. And one of the things we wanted is that you could support your own Kubernetes and then slot in. But it needs to be a Kubernetes. Let me just show you specifically. That includes these variables, but that's not the only thing you need. Let me think a second.
Larry, just
so an example, one of the things that we tripped over was the CNI plugins that sorry, this is a bit of a rat hole, but it was actually pretty important. And I'm just trying to think for a second, where is that? Probably in the roles, RK2 templates. Yeah, here it is. This configuration uses a different CNI plugin, but everything else that you needed to customize Kubernetes to work with Ether is in here, such as, for example, opening up the port ranges.
Just kind of, Larry, to let you know, currently we do have our own multi-host cluster that we deploy ourselves. For now it's a 2-node cluster, and then what I did is I modify Ether in a box to only deploy Helm charts and deploy the core network itself, and we have that up and running for one slice. And that's what I was wondering, how in this specific case, whether we can use your own ramp.
So we took care to have bringing up Kubernetes was a completely distinct step from deploying the core on it. So I think we need to figure out the right way to characterize a definition of what is a compliant core, and then it should work. if you brought your
Okay.
own up.
Okay.
And I think this file in some sense captures those things that are unique.
Okay.
And just let me think. Well, the other thing is just going back up to the top level. There is a hosts inventory file, and I'm in the Kubernetes version. Let me go back out to the top level because that's where we define all of our defaults. So at the on-ramp level, the inventory that you deploy on, it's commented out a bunch of stuff that you would do, say, for a 4-node deployment. But the quick start deployment, which is on-ramp's version of Aether in a box, starts out with one node that's the master node, and one node that is where the simulator runs. And in the case where they are the same node 1 in this case, then it is everything in one box.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah,
So if I
it's
want
probably best
to,
to take a look at the documentation. Which,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna do that at some point. Thanks.
Thanks. This does assume Ansible's running, which there's a recipe for installing Ansible. If you wanted to, there actually is a target to make Ansible that basically pulls in a Ansible name. Yeah, there runs a script that basically runs a Docker container with Ansible pre-installed in it. But the problem with that is that every make target you execute, you're doing it in the context of the container, and that doesn't necessarily have global visibility. So there's some catches to it, but it's there. So I will, after the call, I will update the README with instructions down here, how until we get a permanent URL, how you can build the documentation yourself and look at it as a local file. Okay, so and this is we'll do a full. I'll get Bilal to do a full presentation on this sometime in the near future.
I have one more generic Ether infrastructure question. Actually, I don't know if David is on the call.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the thing is that the machine that was being used for the testing the UPF deployment, I think was down. That's something that David and I had a call a while ago, but since we have been so busy, I haven't had a chance to follow up with him. So I was wondering whether there is any update on that part.
I have no update.
Okay.
You go back and look at that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so we do have some QA bullets, and I know there's been some quite accomplishment on the 1.3 tests. So why don't we jump to that now?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So for SD core release 1.3 test, the manual test is done, and we have started doing 1.3 test automation. So in test automation as well, we have covered 4 features so far out of 8, and we are currently working on auto scaling AMF and SMF pods using CADA feature. Then regarding hardware configurations, we have received eNode B and gNode B. We have configured eNode B, and we are seeing our eNode B is radiating the network, and it as eNode B only supports band 48. We are waiting for a a device that supports band 48. So we have discussed it with our um, ID team, and we are in discussion with them.
That's for the G node B?
That's for eNode B.
Oh, that's for E node B. Okay.
Yeah, eNode B with the latest firmware, it only supports band 48.
Okay.
For Gnode B, we are in touch with Circom support guy, and we are configuring it. There are a few issues that we are seeing. We do see an abort for init packet, so that is what we are discussing with Trinay from Circom. Moving on to our ONF nightly build that we discussed in the last TST. As discussed, we have started on it, and as discussed with Larry, we took our first step and we did a on-ramp deployment using it. And we were able to do a successful run of the default test cases as well.
So I would just request, since we're gonna move, start moving away from it. Whoops. The new on-ramp.
Mhm. Sure.
As another step, and I would just the quick start version would be a good start.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, we will start with that.
So another exercise we started with the TST, who are, a lot of the members are intimately involved in checking code in and triggering tests, is to try to I'm not sure what the right word here is. I guess I'll leave it in here. Prune. What's it called? Baseline?
Yes, the baseline view. If people aren't familiar with it, we can pull up Jenkins real quick and just show it off. Just so people know what we're looking at and what
Yeah,
needs.
If you want to grab, I can stop sharing and let you, were you gonna grab it?
I'm sure. Okay, you should see Aether Jenkins dashboard.
Yep.
Okay. If you come up to the baseline view here, for those who haven't been, this is effectively anything that has been successfully run at least once since June of 2022. Okay. If we look at last order by last successes, we have a large number of happy ones, but I do not know which of these are actually useful anymore and which are not. And what I'd love is if people could inform me of tests that need to be looked at and tests that don't. What I've been doing is bouncing between last success and last failures and trying to keep an idea of people who fail after good successes recently. Okay, so these are fairly new, but notice that here before, most of the failures that we see now are from very old. The last time they ran successfully was very long ago. So if people have it shouldn't be run or need to pass, that would be very helpful.
Should I see in this list the UPF that we discussed in the past?
Hang on. If it ran once since June of 22, yes.
Something like that. It was from last year, early last year. I don't remember when exactly it was.
So just so everyone has the high level context here, we are trying to rein in and understand of all the hundreds of tests, many of which are no longer useful for anything. What are the subset that are essential that we carry forward and start adding to? This baseline is one heuristic for defining that set. If you actually have another heuristic that could prune this down, because as you see here, it's still extremely long and is full of stuff that really probably is not essential, and by the fact that it's been failing and no one's been shouting.
Yeah.
I would really like to have a handle on what's important, both so we can support that, and then we can do a better job of gap analysis, which has been really hard.
Again, baseline view, if you just send me a DM or something of information on how useful or whether tests should be obsoleted, we can keep pruning and working. At the moment, I'm literally looking at comparisons between failures and successes and seeing if things have succeeded long enough ago that we don't care anymore. You know, is this a test, is SDRAN, our lab master, a test that we want? It hasn't passed in 10 months.
Highly likely, based on the name, highly likely that's something that we need, because that's how what I have been using for this Navy project. I have never paid attention to the test itself.
Yeah, I would agree with that assumption, but the fact
Okay.
that
So Gabriel,
my knowledge, nobody has complained about it yet. So
Gabriel,
Well, I have been complaining to Wujun, basically, you know, saying, please, what's going on in here? I mean, several dependency issues I have been finding. But yeah, so basically I have been either using the version 1.4, or lastly I have been using just the master, and whatever issue it is, I have been just locally addressing it, but I have never started, I haven't paid attention that much about this test. But certainly if the name, you know, implies what exactly I'm thinking that implies, that's a kind of like a really important test, because lastly people have been complaining, actually saying that, you know, Run Simulator is not kind of like generating the KPM packets properly, the E2 setup request and things like that. So, you know, that may be related to that, but I have found several things that are not necessarily up to date for in the SDRAN project itself.
So that's exactly the kind of information we're looking for, is which tests have you guys been handling independently, and we haven't updated the central code. So any information you can give me to give me context to get these passing on the central line.
Okay.
Positive for everybody.
Okay,
Yeah,
let me get back to you in that part. But again, for us, the most important part would be to re-enable the UPF test itself, because that's kind of like off for quite some time already, more than a year, I guess.
Okay, I'll take
Okay.
an email confirming whether I'm talking about the right thing.
So
on the subject there, sorry.
go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, I was just going to say on the subject of the Aether Rock API tests, I'm having this problem getting into the definition of what that test is actually doing. I've had this ongoing conversation with DAF about I don't have access to that repo, Aether CI management.
Yeah,
on Garrett,
which confuses me. Obviously it's, you know, sorry, where am I? Aether CI management is really was limited to the Aether CI group, people playing with it, the CI administrators. CI administrators, I added a number of people to it.
yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I checked again just before the meeting and I'm still not seeing it. Maybe I should I log out and log back in or something?
Yeah, well, can we schedule a 30-minute so I can watch over your shoulder and maybe I get some insight into my assumptions being wrong?
Yeah, let's do that. It'll be tomorrow, but I'll ping you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
But yeah, there's clearly a problem there if you can't get in, because you should have access to it now. Okay,
I'm going to record the view here. So in terms of making progress on this, maybe you're perfectly fine living with baseline and having people remove stuff, but it kind of strikes me that it's such a large set that it might also be useful to pluck things out of there and put them into another view. Let's call it gold standard, which we know to be, we have positive affirmation that it's important and needs to be running.
I'm happy with that.
In addition to baseline, which gives us a place to start to know what we want to prune.
Do you want me to create a template, or people want to provide me things initially? What I would basically do is throw everything that's, regularly passing into gold standard, but I do not know if that's useful. If somebody has a better algorithm for me to choose from, please let me know what it is.
Well, I mean, that would be better than nothing, but it could be that we've got stuff regularly running that no one cares about.
Here's a set of stuff that's regularly running. So I would be ecstatic if people could
Start it
confirm
there.
used and important to you, and then I'll move into gold standard. Either file a ticket or throw it onto the infra, to DM to me. Actually, Aether TST channel.
One more thing. For the tests that are SD-RAN related, wouldn't it be good to ask Woojun, or I don't know whether Kushal would have a better perspective of what needs to be there and what's not relevant anymore?
Yes,
I'm saying.
I'm happy to ask anybody who.
Yeah, those of you at Intel, it's kind of, if you could go poke your colleagues to do this, it would be helpful.
Yeah, we can try, but the knowledge that someone like Woojong has may be starting to become historical at this point.
Certainly, Scott, it may be, but I mean, that's kind of the latest or newest knowledge that is available regarding the SD project. I don't know who else may have, that kind of knowledge, at least, from the test perspectives.
I mean, he has been very, very helpful, right? Each time we ask him, right? But I mean, he's not 100% anymore on this project, right? Unfortunately.
Yeah, but at least, it would be a good starting point, at least to have a reference of what is something for and things like that. So, especially in this case for the test.
Yeah, I guess one thing that would be on my mind is, how can we assign ownership of these things, sort of moving forward. If our participation in a certain aspect of the project is not what it used to be, so, something like SD-RAN. I mean, well, I guess ONF is taking leadership on these tests based on this meeting. So if we get things bootstrapped, you guys got it from here, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we still need the community to participate, but yes, Scott, I think that is the critical step.
Right.
So that we have, I mean, if it turns out that we bootstrap it and we've got everything and then no one cares, then that's another possible outcome, but we got to bootstrap it first.
Yeah. So specifically, we could use some help from Woojong. Is there anyone else that we could use some help from?
Well, there's rock specific, SD core specific, so AJ and group.
Kushal maybe also, right?
Sean, maybe.
And Sean with rock, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So what's the easiest way for that information to get out to those who aren't on this meeting and for us to collate it?
So the easiest way is probably if you have specific questions, about specific tests, perhaps.
Yeah, I don't know if there is a way for you to export all those tests and, simple in a spreadsheet split them based on like sets of groups, SD-RAN, ROC, or 5G core, and then send a specific email to the people that are more related to those components.
I
To
can
see
make
if you
an
get some
attempt.
feedback.
I can make an attempt at that, but it would be just the names. Your description of what the tests do is my problem, is I don't have a good handle on that.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying each of the tests is going to point to some type of link where it provides some additional details, what exactly is doing behind that, right?
Debatable, but yeah.
Well, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I can collate them into, what looks like grouping tests. And then send those out appropriately. So expect to see some communication on Aether tests on those lines. But then,
Okay, that sounds good. And then we can have people like Wujong and Kushel and Sean and myself review them. See if anything jogs our memories on them. And then I think, if we have a lot of these that people feel are not important, I do kind of like going with this baseline approach, and you just, for things that haven't been working in a while, you just throw them away. And
It's the view we're trying to, right, there's,
Yeah.
narrowing the view and making sure only those are the ones that get to run.
yeah,
People will complain if there's something that, well, maybe they will, because, that SD-RAN master has been failing for 10 months.
okay, expect to see some notes from me on Aether test today.
yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
All right, I think we will revisit that one until we have some kind of resolution out of it, but I think that's a good start. Is there anything else? I'm just going to call this the golden view. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Guess that's it for today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.